This video is going to explain the first version of the simple number guessing game and what the different parts of the code does. So at the start we've got our opening HTML tag and always right at the end our closing HTML tag. Remember, with HTML tags you always need an opening and a closing one. The difference with closing ones is they always have the slash in front of them. So backslash in front of them. I've put a title for the web page so that when the web page actually loads up, if I just hit F12 we can sort of preview it, get it up and running. It's given the title Number Guessing Game up at the top there. And how the game works, we've got a number 0 and 50. I'm going to put in a guess, and this guess comes up with different numbers. So 23 being too low, if I put in 50, comes up with being too high, or if I guess the actual amount, comes up with the actual correct answer. So continuing on from that point, we have a little bit of the other code. We've got a paragraph tag, bracket P, and its closing tag, and the text that's going to be displayed. This is the default text that appears. What's different here is we've also given an ID name called this output, because we want to reference this later on. Where that actually gets used is in the JavaScript, but later on. We've got the document, which basically means the web page, query selector, so find something, and you've got hashtag input and hashtag output. The hashtag means get the ID that we're looking for. This time I've gone and found this output ID from here. So it stores, I have chosen the number, stores it into this variable called output. We'll talk a little bit more about those later. Other code we've got is an input box, ID input, its type is text because it's just a basic text area, and the little placeholder, that's what's written in by default, little enter your guess ... So that sort of shows up as that default enter your guess there. The last bit is the button. So it's button type. This only exists in HTML5. You'd have to use an input with the type of button if you're using older versions. But most new browsers seem to be supporting HTML5, so we want to try and use that where possible. So the button, I've also just given it a style, basically have no border. If you delete this section here, just use the default button look of the page. It's got a closing tag as well, and it also has the text that appears in by default, so I can change that around to what I want. That concludes all the actual essential HTML on the page. What we also have now is our JavaScript. So it starts with script, type is text/JavaScript. So it goes from here all the way down to the slash script. So anything between the tag on line 10 and on line 38 is all JavaScript commands. So it has to form certain rules. Obviously every command in JavaScript finishes with a semicolon. First thing we need to do is we're just going to set up a couple of variables. Variables start with var, and we're going to have the first one called answer, because that's what this result's going to be, and we're just going to, at the moment, hard code in 25. So this one here, that only has one possible answer, 25. And we're going to make our guess is equal to 0, so we're going to assume that someone hasn't made a guess at this point. Then we're linking up our two bits of information, because we need to basically deal with what the people have typed in the input. So if you note, the input had an ID as well. So I'm going to, by default, store whatever's typed into that text box. Initially it's going to be enter the guess, but it will change with whatever people type in. Enter this variable called input so that we can compare it later on. And the output, we've done the same, it's just storing in that text that's on line 6. Other bits we got is we've got a variable just dealing with the button, and it's just storing all the details to do with the button. So this is how we can track what the button's doing. I've added, buttons know how to do different things, so I've added a style and a different cursor to it, and I've told it I want to use a pointer. You can have a look on w3schools.com to find out more information about those and different possible types. So in this one, what you notice is when I move the mouse over the guess button, it changes into a little hand. And buttons, we've got things called add event listeners. And what you notice is everything you want to do, so I've got my button, I want to do something with the button, I use what's called dot notation. So do the add event listener of the button. We sort of read from right to left. Much the same as the line before, with the button has a style, which has a cursor, which is set to pointer. And they're all sort of linked together. So this button has an event listener. And I want it to work on a click. I'm going to run the click handler function, and this is some options false. We're just going to leave it as those for now. We'll explain those later. And next we move on to functions. These are really good for breaking up our code, making it a lot easier to understand. This click handler one, all it does is just detects, does something when we actually click on the button. In this case, all it's going to do is run the game function, but later on we'll be adding extra code into here. Note functions are always defined by the word function at the start. Then they have, the name or description, and they're followed by a set of brackets. These are just normal curved brackets. When there's nothing in between, it means it takes no arguments. We've actually got a function up above called the add event listener, which actually takes 3 different arguments. 1, 2, 3. But for now we're just going to deal with the ones that we create that don't actually take any arguments. I've also got then the instructions go inside a set of curly brackets. I've got 2 little squiggly brackets there. And note, I've got the game and then semicolon, so that tells me I want to run the game. I have another function called game, once again the curved brackets, squiggly bracket to start with, all the way down to line 37 with the closing squiggly bracket. Now, what I've got is my guess that I've chosen, and we've got another function here called parseInt. Basically means take what is ever written inside the variable in here and turn it into an integer. So I've got the input, which is currently whatever's written in this chunk of text, so it's that section there. What I'm then doing is getting the value of it, so it'll just get the writing, what's typed into it, turn it into an integer. So if I typed in 5, it'll turn it into the number 5. Now we have a little bit of logic that goes on to work out our 3 different options. First one, if the guess is greater than the answer, we want to tell the person that the guess was too high. Otherwise, if it was less than the answer, we want to tell them that it was too low. Otherwise, if the guess is exactly the same as the answer, we tell them a well done message. And note, sort of just like maths, greater than, less than, but the difference with it equals is you've got to use 3 equal signs next to each other. We could also do a greater than or equal to, but that would break our code. So I'm getting, if what's typed into the guess, so let's say in example 5 is greater than the answer, which was up the top here on line 13. If it was that, it would do that, but that's not true. So it's going to go to the next one, and then it would produce the output that's too low. Now, how this works. Output.initHTML, so output being the paragraph tag, .initHTML, so what's actually, the text is actually written inside that tag. So, and we're going to replace the text with that's too high. So what it's going to do is what's written here is will now become that's too high. Note any text or code you want to add in is enclosed, can't even talk, enclosed in a set of speech marks. So strings, then enclosed in speech marks. And we've got the little equal sign, which is called assignment in this instance. So it's basically saying that's too high, is assigned to init.html, which is part of the output. And that same process is repeated for our different messages. That's too low, and you've got it. The if statements, an if, open bracket, then a logical true-false outcome. So these are always either got to give you a true and false outcome. And then set of curly brackets. What we do if it's true goes between that bracket and the closing one. Else, or otherwise, if this one's true, do that. Otherwise, if this one's true, do that. And that will cover all the possible options. Now, those 40 lines of code basically create a very simple game which we'll be improving on at a later point. Have a go editing that code, making your own notes, explaining how it actually works. Oh, the other thing to note is you can actually add comments by putting little slashes. So the 2 slashes, so I can go, explain what this does. Yeah, giving it some description so it makes your code easy to understand. The more code you have, the better it's going to be.